Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We have Dan coming on very shortly. He's just having some technical difficulties. He's currently in Australia cutting a big project, and we're sort of connecting internationally at the moment. And because of those issues, he'll be on just shortly. He's just switching computers here, and we'll see him very, very shortly, okay? So please sit tight, get your questions ready for Dan, and we'll get to chat with him about Elf very shortly. Thanks very much. Oh, I can see you there, Dan.
Okay, I'm under my girlfriend's name here.
Not a problem.
Is it all right? Like
Yeah.
this? Okay, then we'll just do it like this.
How are things?
Things are good. Things are good. Let me see if this is the best camera for this. Okay, this might be better.
Yeah.
Although it's facing my ceiling and not my incredible view of Sydney Harbor here.
How's everything in Australia?
You know, it's so much nicer here because they have it under control by and large, and they take the virus very seriously. So LA is a mess right now, and I'm just really glad I'm here.
What was the COVID transition for you? Like, did you have to quarantine when you got there? What was the rules when you got
Yeah,
there
I had
first?
2 weeks of quarantine. Me and my girlfriend, we got here November 1st, and we had to do 2 weeks of quarantine in under guard in a hotel.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a quarantine hotel. So they're not fooling around here.
Wow.
So but they got me a very nice hotel, and so we did our 2 weeks, and then you go out, and it's like it really is like getting out of prison, because you get out and everyone is on the street, places are full, you know, people are only wearing masks on public transportation and things like that. So.
Wow. So now to jump to Elf, because I think that's what everyone loves to talk about. When you first were working on Elf, did you think it was going to become like, what was your impression? Did you think it was going to become something that became a classic?
No. I mean, I got the gig. I had worked with Favreau before, as he was first I met him as an actor in a movie I did called Very Bad Things. And he really liked the way it was edited, and had been wanting to work with me as he was transitioning into being a director. So, first he wrote and starred in Swingers, although he didn't direct it, but he was sort of the creative force, the main creative force behind it. And then he was, trying to break in as a director, and he had done Made, which basically around when he was finishing that movie, he contacted me and asked me to help him out on that and something he was doing called Dinner for Five. And I had hadn't really been thinking much about him, but then I actually saw him on The Sopranos playing himself
Yeah.
in this one episode. And I was like, oh, okay, I really like this guy now, because he's sort of making fun of himself. He's playing himself, but making fun, and his acting seems to have really grown. So I said I would help. I did a polish on Maid. And then when he was getting Elf, he asked if I'd do it. And I said, yeah, I didn't really necessarily want to do it, but I said yes because I knew that studio really didn't like me. so, so it was one of those safe yeses where you could say yes, and without having to say no to somebody. And then what happened is after the first, the studio did say no, so I was off the hook. I thought for good, as a good thing, but things weren't to his liking after the first few weeks of the shoot, and about a month in, I took over. So for the rest of the shoot, and then the rest of the way, I was the editor. And it was like in '93, I think, or 2003. That is,
yeah.
2000. Yeah.
Now we have Maya online here asking questions. She says it's one of the funniest films she's ever seen, and her mom loves the film Elf. And she wants to know what editing techniques or tricks did you use to help create the comical effect or help improve some of the comical moments?
Yeah, okay. I'll give you a few different rundowns of that. One is that when I hit the ground, I realized that there wasn't room for a lot of cynicism in the movie. So first thing I did is I stripped out a lot of things that were, because it's a fish out of water story, right? So what I wanted to do was have it play a little bit younger, more like Big, the movie Big. And so there was a big cynical element, and I stripped that out, and that was it was kind of a bold move to do it right away and not wait, but I did. In terms of editorial technique, there are techniques in there such as the date with Jovi, where it was actually 6-7 scenes, and basically I took them and I put one piece of music down, which is still in there. It's the Frank Sinatra piece, and made it into one scene. And that's a sort of an editorial technique where you combined a bunch of things to be one thing. I had always wanted to, on our editing machines, there are these transitions that pros will never use, right? It's like the amateurs will use these crazy wipes, and I said, this might be my one chance to use the clock wipe. So I did a couple of clock wipes in there just because they were fun, especially when Will first gets to when Buddy gets to New York the first time he goes into Gimbals, and so it's kind of another montage. There's a lot of montages in there. There's a lot of montage being a bunch of scenes and images put together to form a scene. So those are a couple things that were done.
Now you said you removed some of the cynicism from it. It sounds like there was a tonal shift in the film. What was the original sort of cut looking like in terms of the cynicism?
Yeah, I think what everyone was hoping for, right as we were getting going on that, Old School came out, and it had a very broad Saturday Night Live skit. So in what it was, you would have people like the Jovi character making a lot more fun of the character and making fun of the situation instead of just reacting on it. And so it's a fine line. You don't want everyone to just be loved because there's no conflict. But what you don't want is to have little one-liners and things like that after things. So what it was in order to get what I'd call the heart of the movie, to that feeling of heart, you had to take that down. So there's the skeptical cynicism will exist in the characters, but not as overt and not as affecting how the humor is going to run. And that way it becomes overcoming what is left, and that makes for heart.
Interesting. Now we have a question here from Jonathan, and he wants to know, online you can see a lot of the elf scenes in the North Pole. They have like extra ones that were cut out, but they talk about how when he gets to New York, there's a lot of improvised scenes. Was there any improvised moment in New York that you had to cut out, but you really loved, but it just didn't work in the film?
Oh, it wasn't more okay. Had to cut out, maybe is the wrong way to put it. Didn't have to cut out anything. More or less tried to find a way to make all these things in the toolbox work. Him running around, seeing a guy that looked like Santa, that was all real. Playing the gum gag in parts. I always said, editing wise, my big education for this kind of comedy and comedy in general is Warner cartoons. So what I wanted to do was sort of create that kind of timing and rhythm of Warner cartoons. Jon Favreau had said, well, let's take that New York scene, and again, we were saying let's make a montage, and he really liked. Let me remember this. It'll come to me, but the music was by one of these great jazz artists. The scat thing, and so took that music and sort of built to it. Sometimes I used to be a music video editor way back when, so sometimes I'll still actually put scenes together from the music up. And a couple of these scenes are put together from the music up like that.
Interesting. Now we have a person asking, how long did the editing take you for Elf?
I think it was about 9 months. I always say that I can't listen to Christmas music anymore because I had it every day for 9 months straight.
Wow. Well, and nowadays we're getting such tighter and tighter schedules. How do you tackle, your bigger projects now that you're working on, like Ant-Man and the Wasp and what have you, all the Marvel stuff, with tighter schedules?
Well, it is tighter, but it's like the more you show capacity to do things, the more they'll make you do them at that pace. So if you demonstrate you can do it, you're going to get to do it again like that. And but it is, it's kind of, it kind of is become the modern thing. The Marvel thing is a very aggressive schedule because they generally put the release date out even before they put a script together. So whoever gets to waste time is in the early parts of the process, and then we're all racing to get it done. We're paying for anyone else who's using up the spare time. So.
Now we have another question here, and they want to know, because this relied so heavily on practical effects, and now your Marvel stuff is all CGI heavy. Which do you prefer editing? Is there a benefit to either? Well, there's certain benefits to CGI, I'm sure, but from an editor point of view.
Let me tell you, the advantage of practical effects is that they're there and you're not waiting for them. So you're not imagining or cutting a piece of rudimentary animation in as a placeholder while you're waiting for real effects. So in that fashion, practical is wonderful. What Favreau wanted to do was he said, I mean, he was a young director, but he had a lot of vision, and he said he liked the idea that you make your practical effects look like CGI and your CGI look like practical, so that the audience couldn't tell the difference. And I thought that was a really cool mantra that he had on that.
It's astute, that's for sure. Now we have someone asking, when you're looking at rushes like Elf, how do you assess them? Because in this case, you think about Will Ferrell and he's over the top, and not over the top, I guess is a bad way of saying it, but like he's playing up this character that isn't normal in our world. So how did you assess those rushes to make sure you got the right pieces for the film?
Well, I would say that that's a good general editing question, and that it's always easier if you cut from a point of view, meaning that, as I said, I kind of honed in on what the tone and feel of the movie should be in my mind, and I did say I used big as the example of the appropriate, nature of this as a fish out of water story. So once you have that, your kind of center, your bellwether, your bullseye, you then look at all the footage through that lens, and then it becomes very easy to start discarding things that don't fit in that. Now, what can often happen is I'll go ahead. Now, that's a style of editing I do. I'll go ahead and make this choice, and then maybe the director will come in and go, "Oh, no. It's more like this." And I go, "Oh, okay, let me realign my whole vision thing, and I'll still be able to now attack it and do the same thing." But it was fortuitous for that movie that I kind of understood that tone going in, and I understood the things that weren't gonna work with that, and that caused a lot of angst in some of the studio and producer world, because it meant discarding things that they were not wanting to discard.
And we have someone who says they want to know what's your go-to drink when you're editing?
Oh. Well, it's funny. It used to be, I used to drink Diet Pepsis, which ultimately my doctor told me was poisoning. So back then, now I drink a lot of green tea after my coffee. So okay. I like cold green tea.
Interesting. Now, David wants to know, do you have a particular setup or approach to begin the editing process, or is there more project specific? How do you actually start your editing?
Well, editing is first done in the head. You start down. I do have a mode where I haven't figured it out, and I want to kind of start to get in the center. There's some editors whose school of thought is that you have to look at everything, but I don't. I know that eventually I'll look at every frame that was shot. I know that, but I don't feel I need to do it up front. So one of the tricks I do is I first look at the representative take of every setup they do. Meaning, if the camera was a wide shot of Buddy and his family, I'll look at one take of that to see exactly how that was. And then if they did a close up and they did all these others, I'll look at a take of everything just so I understand what the working coverage is going to be. So then I'll get that in my head. And at a certain point, what happens, I start to mold it. I always say that editing nowadays is a lot like sculpting, because it's clay. You lay it down and you can work it. Used to be way back in the day when we were cutting on film, it was more like painting, because you couldn't damage your print. You had to make so many decisions before you actually even made a cut. Now I can mold and shape like I'm a sculptor. And then what happens is I'll start to play and do that. And then at some point, it'll just hit me. Okay, that's the way to attack this. So I start by seeing what I have. And then I kind of also in my head, I see how I want to see it. What do I want to see here? So you get all this footage, and they may have a wide shot for the entire scene. And I go, you know what? I don't want to use the wide shot anywhere but here. Maybe because there's you're dressing the crowd, or there's a big physical reason. So, okay, now I can start excluding it from everywhere else under this criteria, this point of view I have. And then I start piecing things together that way. So usually there's something that I call, my anchors. And those are, I'll look at things and I'll go, this shot's gotta be it. I may know nothing else right now about this scene, but I know this shot's going in. So once you know that shot's going in, then you can, if you haven't figured everything else out, you can start to go, well, how do I get from this anchor to this anchor, you know? Because now I'm going to have to construct the scene. It just can't ride on this, or maybe it can, but depending what it is. And so I'll look for those things that I know have to be, you know, Buddy does this one thing with the gum or whatever, like, you know, this is, or so, you know, something like that. That's going in. So now I'm going to construct in a way that because those anchors are special moments, generally speaking, then I'm going to construct the scenes in a way that make the special moments the most special they could be.
Interesting. Now, Joshua wants to know, you know, let's say you've used these anchors and you've got the shots you love, but let's say you have a creative difference with the director about that shot choice. How do you work with the director or the studio to overcome these creative differences?
You know, I have, people have asked me, do I have any control? And the real answer is I have none. I'm there. I'm working for the director. The director is ultimately working for the studio, and they don't. But the truth of the matter is that if I don't get us really pretty close right off the bat, there's just never enough time to actually get these films right. So I have to kind of get us at least to the 80th percentile, if not the, you know, the higher than that, in order for us to even have a chance. So, but again, if you cut from a point of view, if the director then says, no, that's not it, and it's this, then I can realign and quickly do it. And I honestly, I'll debate, I'll say why I like things, and it's for them to make the choice, ultimately. And I find most of the time they agree with me. So, you know, very little, or we'll look together and, oh yeah, that was interesting too. That take has this, and I'm the first. I'll tell you what, you want directors and people to challenge your editing, because you want to make sure it's as good as it, you know, the scene's as good as it can be. So I don't mind. I call it kicking the tires. And if they won't do it, I'll do it myself. I'll go and say, wait, was there another way to do this? Yeah, let me try that. No, I like the first way better.
Well, what's nice about working on the Avid now is that, you know, back in the 90s when you were cutting film, you had to undo your work print and like reassemble in another way. And if you can't remember how you did it, now you can go back. So it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
In that
well,
sense.
I'm lucky in that I've cut on the Avid almost all of my 35 movies. So I started on in 1992.
Wow.
And the you know, digital editing. So even back then, and during ELF, very interesting, we had concurrent rooms. So we had the digital editing tools that we're all used to now, and we actually had film editing in there, because what had to happen is, in order to screen it in a theater back then, we didn't have high definition. We had to follow, and I had a couple assistants who they put together on film the 35 millimeter film print of what I was doing inside the digital editing thing. So it would follow, and then we would get to the previews and put up an actual film.
Wow, that must have been very cumbersome for them to undertake.
It seemed state of the art at the time.
Now, I got a long question here from Christopher, so I have to read it because it's very specific for ELF. He says, the film is mentioned in Save the Cat as being a rather dark comedy and having underlying dark moments. For example, when Will Ferrell contemplates suicide on the bridge. How much darkness were you directed to incorporate in a happy Christmas comedy? And how did you keep those undertones under as an editor? What was that something you kept in mind while you were editing?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's again, it's falling within the format. You're describing what we would call the all is lost moment. And you know, you really want to get the audience on the protagonist, the main character side, and then you want him to feel what he feels. So you can't enjoy the redemption without hitting the lows. You can't have peaks without valleys. It's just the way it works. So if it's all fluff, those become uninteresting movies to you. You know, if it's all here, well, I don't want to name any names, but if it's all in the positive, then there is no overcoming and uplifting. It's just cheese.
Well, it's funny because I showed my 3-year-old daughter the film this year, and she's very upset that Buddy got yelled at by his dad. and then, but she really enjoyed. There's little moments that she keeps referencing now throughout the day. But the one thing that really bugged her was Rudolph didn't make an appearance in New York in the park when they're trying to get the reindeers ready to go.
Well, that's because Buddy is Rudolph.
Oh,
that's all you have to realize is that Buddy is Rudolph. But so basically, we all grew up, you know, Favreau, writers, everybody. We all grew up watching this Christmas special every year, the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah,
and loved it. I mean, it was like I remember as a kid, I couldn't wait. It was going to come on, and it was like a big thing. We had, you know, 3 networks and everything when I was a kid. And so this would come on, and we every year would see this and would know this. But Buddy is Rudolph. Buddy is, if you remember what Rudolph's journey is, and then, you know, he doesn't have Santa's faith and all this. He's kind of the loser reindeer. And then he's the one who ends up saving Christmas. So that's Buddy is Rudolph.
Wow. Yeah, I never even thought about it. Now that you pointed it out, though, it makes complete sense. Yeah. Now we have someone says, thanks, Dan, for doing this. And they want to know, how do you balance the director's vision versus what the studio wants?
Well, we kind of, that journey is with, I'm with the director. If we're in a, you know, doing it right, we're in total alignment. And then the studio will have their visions. It's up to the director first and foremost. Like, I have to sell what I'm doing to the director. The director has to sell what we're doing to the studio. So that becomes a big part of it. And then if we're not in alignment, like I think people know that Elf may have been one of these pictures that the studio thought it was going to be different than it was. Then we really rely on the test audiences to be the judge and jury, and that had one of the most miraculous previews I've ever attended, because of the reaction of the audience was beyond any expectation.
Wow. Now, someone wants to know, in your edit suite, do you do any color work on your projects in terms of like just tweaking it for the director, or do you leave everything to the colorist?
Yeah, I do only if I get stuff back that's all over the place. I'll play with it, mm-hmm. But that is more, you know, one needs to know what their expertises are, and mine is color. But I know when it's not right. I know what to tell a color person, and I think nowadays every editor is kind of a hybrid. They all have other skill sets that they bring to the table, and some of them are excellent with color, some of them are excellent with sound, and you know, so it would be great to be an editor who was as, you know, good at color as a colorist. But I like to work closely with those guys.
Now, you've been really generous with your time. I have one last question for you, and I've been asking this to everyone we interviewed during this pandemic. Because everyone's locked inside, and because you had to spend 14 days inside in Sydney, what would you say, or what would you suggest people watch on either Netflix, Hulu, whatever streaming service they have?
Well, you know, that's a very personal thing. I certainly enjoyed Queen's Gambit on Netflix. That kind of blew me away. But you know, I'm with all of you guys. I'm the modern watcher, binge watcher. I I get angry at the way we used to watch things, and why to wait another week to see what's going on here?
Well, and it gets frustrating now if a show does that. You're like, I gotta wait a week.
Yeah, like, how did I get through Game of Thrones? It was so great. So yeah, I watched that. We've just been going back and watching things like El Chapo that I hadn't seen, and just various kind of things. I like to lighten it up a little around this time, so I'm always looking for something. But I'm open to anybody's suggestions to tell me what they're watching too.
Now, if you don't mind, I have one person just snuck in a question last minute here. They're wondering, how do you see the new world of remote editing, seen as COVID's affected the pre-production and the challenges that sort of sets out for you as an editor?
Yeah, on the project I'm on now, I had to do months of it alone in my space in Los Angeles. First for months without any assistant next to me until finally I had my main assistant with me. But it's weird. I think it's slower. I think it's hard to sort of get your rhythms, and communication is way harder. And it's also great too, because it's like, wow, I don't have to go into the office. I don't have to brave traffic. I just get up and throw something on, sit there in my elf pajamas all day and edit a movie. So it's been a mixed bag, but I think like everyone else, I'm ready to sort of go back to the world that will be, because this whole thing has altered our world enough that some of these things will hold. And I hope to a degree some of the remote editing holds, and to a degree it goes back to the way it was.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you and letting all these people ask their questions. And of course, happy holidays.
Happy holidays to all of you. Thanks for your patience while I was getting up and running here.
Not a problem.
Watch Elf another 12 times before Christmas, and enjoy. All right.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.